Democratic strategist and friend of the show, Mike Nellis, made another appearance on Piers Morgan Uncensored for a heated panel debate about political rhetoric. And to his credit, Mike made a very compelling case about why he is still going to refer to Donald Trump as an authoritarian and a fascist. Because, spoiler alert, he is. And if Trump doesn't like that, then Trump should stop acting like an authoritarian and fascist. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to play from this relatively recent episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored, starting with this.
For Hillary to start lecturing people about not demonizing one another when she was leading just before the election, this sentiment that somehow Trump's the new Adolf Hitler, followed by the new Nazis, it's pretty rich, isn't it?
Look, I think if the Rasmussen poll said that 54% of people think what happened to Charlie Kirk is somewhat justified, that's deplorable, and both sides of the aisle should speak ill of it and say that there's no place in it. I think Republicans who have called Kamala Harris, including the President of the United States, fascist. I think J.D. Vance calling Trump a Nazi in private was also inappropriate. But I think there's one thing that we should agree on is that these tech CEOs are spineless and need to take a stand for what's right and not what's profitable.
So that is Daniel Coe, former Biden appointee. I think it was, I can't remember which department. Oh, I'm blanking on it. I want to say he worked for the Department of Labor under President Biden. I'm 85% sure that that's the case. He's been on Tommy Lauren's show, like Mike Nellis. He's become a liberal podcaster. He's a very good debater. But he's making the case that political rhetoric, heated political rhetoric that Piers Morgan often complains about, divisive political rhetoric, has often been used by the left against the right. This is not simply a left on right issue. It's also a right on left issue. And there's no politician which demonizes his political opponents more than Donald Trump. And again, before we play some of the other clips, Piers Morgan likes to attack, as many right-wingers do, Hillary Clinton because of the basket of deplorables comment, which was made at a private fundraiser. And she said half, not all, half of Trump supporters are in what she calls the basket of deplorables because they're racist and misogynist, that they have, very sinister, nefarious motives. It's not simply that they want tax cuts or because, they're, social conservatives. It's that they have very dark, unacceptable views on people and minorities. Here's the thing. If we take that, just that one clip from, almost 10 years ago from Hillary Clinton, we can do a forensic audit. And for every one clip you have of something like that from Hillary Clinton, we have 10 clips from Donald Trump and prominent Trump supporters saying the same things about liberals, progressives, blue cities, blue states, women, minorities, marginalized groups, the LGBTQ community, the media. And so again, the problem is I don't have an issue with people criticizing Hillary Clinton about that rhetoric, but we need to be consistent. And if we apply the standard consistently, Donald Trump is just objectively worse. Here's another clip.
Well, I do think you have way too many people on the left and the right who love to call somebody a Nazi at the drop of a hat to try and win an argument. I think it's very lazy, reductive thinking that a lot of people do. Now, I will push back on something, which is that I do believe Donald Trump is a fascist, and fascists use the power of the federal government to create the image of the country that they want, and they abuse it. We saw that with Jimmy Kimmel. We saw it this week. Matt was talking about how we shouldn't be suppressing the free press. But right now, the Pentagon's trying to tell reporters what they can or cannot report on, whether it's confidential information or not, or highly classified information or not. So this is a real thing. Like Donald Trump is consolidating power in this government. He is abusing that power to put money in his own pocket, to go after his political opponents, to go after Harvard, to go after law firms, to go after comedians, to go after anybody that he views as a threat or someone who has done him wrong. It's my biggest criticism of the modern day Republican Party. It is not a party of solutions to solve and help improve people's lives. It's a party of grievance, and it's a party of one. And what you see in Donald Trump is he's trying to become a single source of truth and a single source of morality for an entire group of people in this country. And I do think that's dangerous. And I am like, Jesse, is that the name of the first panelist from Fox?
So, and it goes on like that. But again, I want to double down on how compelling that point is. In the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and political violence we've seen across both sides of the political aisle in the past several years, there's usually this call, well, Democrats need to stop saying things about the Republican Party. As far as I'm concerned, I believe both parties have a right to refer to the opposition as authoritarian, fascist, or communist if that's what you believe the other side is. Now, the reason that I think Trump's rhetoric to describe President Biden, President Obama, or Vice President Harris, or Hillary Clinton as communists and Marxists, and he also said fascist, by the way, The reason that I take issue with Trump saying those things isn't because he doesn't have a right to say them. It's just because I don't think they're accurate, right? I don't think Kamala Harris is a communist. President Biden was the least neoliberal president in modern American history, but certainly more neoliberal than communist or even socialist. And so I just don't think the label applies. I think the label of fascist and authoritarian does apply very accurately to Donald Trump for some of the reasons that Mike Nellis laid out here. It was a very good case to make. And so the fact of the matter is you can say these things about the opposition side while also stressing a message of nonviolence. You can say, hey, listen, I believe such and such is a communist. I believe such and such is a fascist. Here's why I believe that. I'm not just throwing these incendiary labels around. I think they do apply in this situation. And also, even if you agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. In the United States of America, a constitutional democratic republic governed by laws and civility and these things, even fascist authoritarians and communists have a right to due process and a right to safety under law. If they break the law, then they should be prosecuted. But otherwise, there's no room for political violence or vigilante justice against communist authoritarians and fascists simply because they have communist, authoritarian, or fascistic views. That's the whole point of the blanket protection of rule of law and political discourse in this country. So you can simultaneously stress both of those things. That, hey, if you don't like it, beat them at the ballot box. Or if you think they broke the law, then, prosecute them or sue them civilly, whatever it may be. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. And again, to the extent that they are, which I don't believe they are, well, Donald Trump repeatedly and Trump MAGA figures repeatedly refer to Vice President Harris and Joe Biden as all the sorts of things that Piers Morgan clutches his pearls about when it's the right calling the left calling the right that. He doesn't give a shit when the right calls the left that, and that's part of the problem, right? That's how you know it's not an actual consistent principle. He just wants a world in which Trump can say whatever he wants, whenever he wants, about whomever he wants with impunity, but Trump should be protected from incendiary rhetoric in turn, and that just doesn't work, and that's never going to happen. One last clip.
But you said that the left has been celebrating and not condemning what happened to Charlie Kirk. Every single major member of the Democratic Party, including myself, has condemned the violence that has happened.
Yeah, but we've also seen. But hang on, Mike. We've also seen Mike.
Ilhan Omar.
Mike. I have personally posted about 4 or 5 examples of professors at universities, teachers, doctors, right, and they are brazenly celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk on social media, and then they're surprised they get fired. Can I make this point, though?
Here's the thing. You have people on the internet who are going to say stupid things, and anybody who is celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder is doing the absolute wrong thing and should be condemned. I completely agree with that. The people on the left who are saying the most dangerous things about Kirk are random people on the internet. The people on the right who are saying the most dangerous things in this moment are Donald Trump.
No, they're not.
People like me, Scott. It's J.D. Vance who went on the internet to go tell everybody, go find people and cancel them. Where's the party of free speech in that? Come on.
So that's a very, very powerful, very important point. That's the difference. That is fundamentally the difference, the most important difference, I would argue, between the two political parties. When you have mass political movements or mass social movements, which is what political parties are, right? You have the leadership, and then you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, tens of millions of followers, which is what both political parties have. In social and political movements that large, you will obviously have extremists. You will have crazy people. And the question you should ask yourself when evaluating either your own party or the opposition party, but when you're evaluating any sort of party or movement, is to what extent are those extremists representative of the party? What are their numbers? How much of what they say dominate what the party does or tries to do? How much of it is reflected in the leadership of the party? To what extent does the leadership of the party try to contain or excise or expel their extremists, right? That's what's important. Now, if you want to say that the lib-left coalition or the Democratic Party could do better, that's fine. I'm open to that. But one thing I know to be true, and that nobody on the opposite side can ever prove otherwise, is that the Democratic Party does an infinitely greater job of isolating and alienating its extremists, and the fact that its extremists are not represented in the leadership of the Democratic Party, unlike the Republican Party. The extremists in the Republican Party define the Republican Party according to Republicans. They have taken over the Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not some shit poster on Twitter. She is a duly elected member of the House of Representatives, and she is a close ally of Donald Trump, as is Lauren Boebert, as was Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs, just the crazy Laura Loomer, for example, who doesn't have formal power in the sense that she's not elected to office, She's very close to Donald Trump. She's basically the de facto White House human resources director. She gets people fired. She has extraordinary influence. She's not some random person who's impotent. Donald Trump himself, these people lead the party. They have their hands on the levers of power. And that makes what the Republican Party is doing with respect to extremism infinitely worse and infinitely more deserving of criticism. And so anyone who suggests otherwise is creating a false equivalent. So listen, I really appreciate, Mike Nellis going on these shows and making that case, which is, hey, listen, you have to point to like random TikTokers and random people on Twitter. The people I'm pointing to are infinitely more important and powerful and therefore more dangerous and therefore more deserving of scrutiny, criticism, and scorn. And this is, again, the classic argument that Piers is always destined to lose, and people like Piers, because they have no satisfying refutation of that. They want to grade the power elite of the Republican Party on a curve. They want to hold the sitting president of the United States, as long as it's a Republican and as long as it's Donald Trump, to an equal or even lower standard than random TikTokers. And that's just stupid. It just really is. And they would never have that standard if the shoe were on the other foot. If Joe Biden or Barack Obama said half of the unhinged shit that Donald Trump has, except they would say it about Republicans, then Trump saying it about the Democrats, and somebody like me or Mike Nellis came up and said, hey, listen, this is Joe Biden being Joe Biden. This is Barack Obama being Barack Obama. Look at all these random right-wing influencers. Piers Morgan in that timeline in the multiverse would say, hang on. Are you comparing a random TikToker to the president of the United States? But because it's Trump and the shoe is on the other foot, it's exactly what he's doing here. So there you have it. Great performance by Mike Nellis and Daniel Cohen. Again, I apologize. I'm finishing up a viral infection here, so if I sound like I'm going through puberty, bear with me. But great performance by them, and I'm sure that this discourse is going to be repeating itself for years to come. But we need to double down on that, which is our crazies are not in power. The right's crazies are in power, and that's the biggest difference. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.